Hey Rebel Rouser, I'm Alan Voivod, and this is Star Wars 7x7. It's episode number 1618. Thank you so much for joining me for it. And I am going to share a couple of snippets of a conversation that I had for the Followers of the Force podcast. The guy over there who runs that show, David Triana, asked if I would be interested in coming on the show to talk about my Star Wars journey, and it was really awesome to be asked, and I had a great time chatting with him. Actually, we recorded this podcast while I was in Maine last month, and, he had it come out on November 30th, but I said, hey, do you mind if I share a couple of snippets from the show on Star Wars 7x7? And he said, yeah, of course, very nicely. And so that's what we're going to do here today. It's so funny doing 7-minute shows or 7-ish minutes, and then when I get the opportunity to be on a podcast that runs, an hour or more, I always wonder for a moment what's going to happen. But apparently the floodgates can be opened. And so, yeah, if you check out Followers of the Force podcast and look for the episode that dropped on November 30th there, you can hear the full episode. But if you want a preview of the conversation between me and David, then that's what you're going to get here. In this particular snippet, David is asking about my prequel area. Let's try that again. Prequel era experiences, and I tell him a story that I don't think I've actually told on Star Wars 7x7 before about my experiences with the prequels. So I hope you enjoy it, and I hope you will consider subscribing to Star Wars 7x7. I'm going to give you all this stuff before we get into the interview situation. And I hope you will also support Star Wars 7x7 by joining me in the community at patreon.com/SW7x7. And before I go into the interview, let's just put it out there. May the Force be with you wherever in the world you may be. And again, I hope you enjoy this snippet of my conversation with David Triana from the Followers of the Force podcast.
When you look back at that time, what are some things that really stick with you, and things that that you really would never forget about that prequel era?
I was in Tampa, Florida for work, and at the time I was living out in Los Angeles, but I had occasion to be in Tampa for work, and it was either July or August of 1999, and it was just thunderstorm after thunderstorm after thunderstorm, and I was sitting in my hotel room, stir crazy, and I finally said, you know what, I've had it, this is enough. And I drove to the nearest Toys R Us. And I ended up stuffing my suitcase with about a dozen action figures and a pod racer. And they made a catapult thing for one of the Gungan catapults. And it had like these little like plastic, 3 of the purple energy balls like stacked together. And then you could, or 4 of them, and you sit them in the catapult and you could fling it like all of that. Like I ended up going on a crazy shopping spree in July or August of '99.
That's awesome.
And it was, my imagination was all fired up again. And, the prequels comparatively are not my favorites. I do like the original trilogy better, but I have to say over the years, I've definitely gotten to appreciate the prequels a lot more. Not saying that I was necessarily down on them back in the day, but there's certain elements about them that I think definitely have grown on me over time. I mean, in thinking of Attack of the Clones, some of the dialogue between Anakin and Padme, and where like Anakin's like, I can't, at the time I was like, gosh, that's kind of cringy. And then the older I got and thinking back, I'm like, you know what? That's the kind of stuff that I was like, writing about in my teenage years. Like that's exactly the kind, that's exactly what it would have been like when I was a teenager. And I'm thinking to myself, the reason why I'm going like, is actually because it's like kind of hitting too close to home.
Right.
Is what it is. And I'm like, okay, you know what? Like maybe some of this stuff is really a bit more brilliant than we're necessarily giving it credit for. And so, I've definitely come to appreciate, particularly Phantom Menace and Attack of the Clones. And I think, like with the people who talk about the viewing order and like the machete order, and the people who say you don't even need to watch the Phantom Menace, I think there's a lot of really amazing ideas in the Phantom Menace, and I think just visually it's incredible, and I absolutely think it's must-see viewing for any Star Wars aficionado whatsoever. And yeah, maybe taxation is not the most exciting way to
Right.
get into a thing, but like there's still so much eye candy in that movie that I don't think you can pass it up. I've really come to greatly appreciate it. But even back then, even '99 when it came out, and I saw it as many times as I could in the theater, and then I thought to myself, my gosh, what am I going to do for 3 years? Like that same experience of what it was like being a kid going, I'm going to have to wait 3 years for the next one. Like we were resigned to the idea that we were never going to see a Star Wars movie again. And then suddenly they're making one. And then, oh no, 3 years again. But at least we could, console ourselves with the idea that, hey, at least there would be another one coming.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was still a very exciting time.
Yeah. I remember. It's funny. I remember snapshots of each movie in the theater.
Mm-hmm.
With Phantom Menace, it was, aside from that duel in front of the screen, I have the snapshot of Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon talking to Jar Jar once they land on Naboo.
Yeah.
That's really the only snapshot I get from that movie. For Attack of the Clones, it's Yoda getting his lightsaber for the duel with Dooku, and Sith. Oh, Sith, I want to say, is Anakin confronting Mace Windu as he's about to kill the Emperor. Those are the snapshots from each of the prequels that I remember as I'm sitting in the theater. And for whatever reason, also when R2 throws gasoline on the droids and burns them up and then flies away, I remember that too for whatever reason. But after 2005, once again, we're at the period of, okay, this is the end now, apparently. From this point on, we're not getting any more Star Wars movies. How did you feel about that? You were probably like, okay, we're going to go through this again. Oh, this is going to be another, now that we know 10 years, but at the time we had no idea.
Yeah. And I will say, too, just in terms of snapshots, if I can pedal back
absolutely.
one moment. Watching The Phantom Menace, the moment when R2-D2 comes on screen and he goes up onto the outer hull of Amidala's ship and is trying to fix the deflector shields, this close to openly weeping in the theater, and probably at least tears coming down
right.
That moment was just that was when I knew it was back, and that was
This podcast is not endorsed or sponsored yet by Lucasfilm Limited, Disney, or 20th Century Fox, and is intended for entertainment and information purposes only. Star Wars, the Star Wars logo, all names and pictures of Star Wars characters, vehicles, and any other Star Wars-related items are registered trademarks and/or copyrights of Lucasfilm Limited or their respective trademark and copyright holders. May the force be with them. All original content is copyright 2018 Star Wars 7x7. We hope you love it.